Why did no one see it coming? The mountains were quiet that morning, too quiet for men who had learned to read silence as if it were scripture. Jagged towered like black teeth against a pale sky, shadows slicing across the valley floor. Lieutenant Commander Blake Viper Kennedy had run dozens of missions through hostile terrain, but something about this place, the stillness, the unnatural hush of windless air gnawed at his instincts. "Keep sharp," he whispered into comms, though his team hardly needed the reminder. SEAL Team Alpha didn't miss much, but even the sharpest blades dull when a trap is sprung by hands that know exactly how you'll cut. The first shots cracked before the team ever saw movement. Automatic bursts from the high ground, controlled, overlapping fields of fire. Kennedy didn't hesitate. "Contact, multiple vectors. Move, move." His voice was steel over radio waves. And then the valley came alive. Muzzles flashed from ridges, bursts thundered from concealed nests, and the mountain itself seemed to spit fire. Rock splinters ripped through the air as rounds chipped into their cover. The trap had been sprung, and it was perfect. Staff Sergeant Fury Wright pressed herself against cold stone, heart hammering, eyes calculating distances faster than her thoughts could form. She had always trusted silence, but now silence had betrayed them. Fall back immediately," Kennedy's roar cut through the chaos. Froze, fall back, retreat. She glanced down the slope, where their exit route was already bleeding with hostile fire. Shadowed figures were moving in, disciplined, precise, not the reckless fighters she had expected. Whoever planned this knew how SEALs thought, knew how to herd them into a kill zone and lock the gate behind. Her teammates shifted, preparing to move. Some fired suppressive bursts, others counted their magazines with quick flicks of fingers. Fear edged their movements, not panic, but the grim math of men who knew they were outnumbered 4-1, pinned and bleeding time. His breathing slowed. She rested her cheek against the stock of her M416, optics scanning. Through her scope she caught one fighter sprinting for a better angle, 2 rounds, and he dropped. Another was setting up a machine gun on the ridge. 3 precise bursts silenced the barrel before it spoke. Her rifle cracked rhythm into the storm, carving holes in the tightening noose. But it wasn't enough. RPG trails arced across the sky like vengeful comets. The first slammed into the slope 20 meters off, showering debris across the team. The second ripped closer, concussive force rattling her teeth. The third struck their comms specialist. In a blink, the lifeline to command was gone. Someone screamed, cut off by another blast. For the briefest second felt it, the surge of fear she rarely allowed herself to name. Not fear of death. That was a companion she had made peace with long ago. This was different. Fear of watching her brothers fall, one by one, while she stayed crouched, doing nothing more than delaying the inevitable. Kennedy's voice snapped back into her headset. "All units, tactical withdrawal, Bravo point, 90 seconds. Move." 90 seconds. 90 seconds might as well have been an eternity. They wouldn't last 20. Pulled back from her scope, chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. She could feel the decision forming, a weight pressing against her ribs. Retreat meant survival for some, but retreat also meant leaving this valley in enemy hands, hands that had already proven too clever, too disciplined, too dangerous. Hands that would reset their trap for the next American unit that passed through. Her jaw tightened. She whispered not into her mic but into the air. "Not like this." She stood. Bullets hissed past immediately, chipping rock where her head had been a second earlier. But she didn't flinch. She shouldered her rifle, stepped into open view, and let her first controlled burst drop a man aiming an RPG from above. Another pivot, 3 more down. "Fury, what the hell are you doing?" Kennedy's voice cracked with disbelief. "Get down, that's a direct order." She didn't answer, not yet. A round smacked close enough to burn her cheek with stone fragments. Another rattled across her plate carrier. She kept moving forward, firing, reloading, firing again. Rhythm, precision, breath, movement. Finally, she keyed her mic, voice calm, steady, the same tone she used whether she was calling out a target on the range or telling a teammate the weather. "Viper, get the team out. I'll solve our problem." Kennedy barked, "Negative. We don't leave people behind." "You're not leaving me behind," replied. Her tone carried no heat, no anger, just certainty. "I'm clearing the route." And then she cut comms. There was silence inside her helmet now. Only the thundering echo of enemy fire, the pound of her heart, the whisper of breath against her mic. She moved straight into the kill zone. The fighters above hesitated. Confusion rippled through their fire patterns. Who charges a fortified line alone? Who ignores every doctrine, every number, every law of survival? Because retreat wasn't survival. Retreat was death delayed, defeat guaranteed. Her rifle sang in bursts, each round placed with surgeon's precision. The spotters guiding RPGs dropped first, their absence cutting enemy firepower in half within minutes. She shifted angles, used rocks and shadows, advancing where no sane soldier would. Enemy comms flared, panicked voices breaking through the static. Kennedy's team intercepted. "Single operator attacking our position. All units engage immediately." But they couldn't pin her. She was smoke in the trees, shadow on stone, a presence they couldn't predict, couldn't pin down. With every shot, with every body that felt the fear inside her melt into something harder, something sharper. Not rage, not glory, something simpler: duty. For 18 minutes, SEAL Team Alpha fought to survive, watching from a distance as one of their own rewrote the rules of war. And yet, even as her rifle thundered and her legs carried her through the storm, knew the truth she hadn't told anyone, not Kennedy, not the men who trusted her with their lives. The truth that pressed against her chest with every breath. Her magazines were finite. Her strength was finite. And there was no guarantee that any of them would live to see the other side of this valley. She was buying time, nothing more. And yet time was exactly what they needed. Because sometimes, time was enough to turn retreat into survival, and survival into something more. What makes a soldier step forward when everyone else steps back? That question lingered like smoke over the battlefield, though none of her teammates had time to ask it aloud. They were too busy obeying orders, moving toward extraction, firing bursts behind them, fighting through waves of closing enemy fire. But each man, Ghost, Phoenix, Hammer, the others stole glances toward the ridge where Fury Wright disappeared. They caught flashes of her muzzle, glimpses of her silhouette cutting across the valley, too far forward, too exposed, moving as though rules of survival didn't apply. "She's insane," muttered between gasps as he scrambled down a ravine, blood seeping through his sleeve. "No," Phoenix shot back, her voice hard, even as bullets chipped rock near her helmet. "She's different." Kennedy didn't comment. He couldn't. His eyes were on the map in his mind, calculating every angle, every risk. He'd given the retreat order, but his gut twisted as he heard last words echo through comms. "I'll solve our problem." What kind of problem solver runs straight into enemy fire alone? Knew the answer. She just didn't have time to explain it. Her boots skidded across loose gravel as she cut left, using a ridge to mask her movement. She slid into cover behind a boulder, exhaled, and reloaded with practiced calm. The magazine clicked into place, 60 rounds left. "Not enough," she whispered. The words weren't complaint, just calculation. She raised her scope again. 2 fighters were sprinting for the bunker above, carrying fresh belts of ammo for the machine gun. Squeezed twice, 2 bodies crumpled mid-run. She shifted, tracked another silhouette climbing higher, 1 round to the chest, another to the throat. The rifle spoke, and the mountain answered with silence. Still, she felt it pressing in, the weight of numbers. For every one she dropped, 3 more seemed to emerge. She could hear them shouting, their language fractured by panic, their voices sharp with urgency. They weren't expecting this. No one had planned for one woman to turn their kill zone into her hunting ground. And yet, his hands trembled briefly when she lowered her rifle. She clenched her fists, forcing the tremor away. Adrenaline was burning hot, but underneath it lived something colder, the fear she refused to admit. She remembered training days at Little Creek, instructors drilling into her skull, never isolate, never break formation, never assault fortified positions alone. Every rule, every lesson, every doctrine screamed that what she was doing was suicide. But doctrine didn't bury brothers. Doctrine didn't carry flags home. Doctrine didn't hold the weight of silence in a family kitchen after a folded triangle of cloth was handed to a mother. Her grandfather's face flickered in her memory. Vietnam, the stories her father never told in full, the silence at dinner tables when his name came up, had grown up under that silence. She carried it now, strapped to her chest with every magazine. She wasn't retreating, not here, not ever. Above her, the command bunker loomed like a scar carved into the mountain. Reinforced walls, reinforced steel, firing arcs that overlapped with cruel perfection. Somewhere inside, the enemy commanders directed every move, every ambush, every rocket that had shredded her team. Colonel Petro, Colonel, names whispered in briefing rooms, ghosts of Russian intelligence turned warlords. They'd studied men like Kennedy, mapped the psychology of American special operations, built kill zones not from guesswork but from intimate knowledge. And yet they hadn't studied her. Shifted, crawling higher, weaving through shadow and stone. She moved like smoke, a flicker here, a blur there, always where no one expected. The enemy noticed too late. Bursts cracked overhead, but she was already gone, sliding under dead ground where their barrels couldn't reach. Her rifle barked again, 2 quick shots dropped flankers trying to circle her. She ducked, rolled, fired again. Movement, breath, squeeze, relocate. Her rhythm was unbreakable, mechanical, almost cruel in its precision. Still, for every man she felled, doubt whispered louder. How many rounds left? How long until they box you in? How long until the SEALs realize you're not buying time, you're spending it? Her throat was dry, sweat dripped into her eyes, stinging. She blinked it away, lips pressed tight. The truth was brutal. She wasn't here to win. Not alone, not against this. She was here to hold the mountain long enough that her brothers could escape. If it cost her life, then so be it. Better her than all of them. But in war, intentions don't always dictate outcomes. Sometimes chaos itself decides. As she crept closer to the bunker, enemy comms crackled loud enough she could hear them with her own ears. Desperate voices shouting, overlapping orders, fear bleeding into syllables. She's flanking the northern bunker. How is she moving through our fields? Converge on her position. Don't let her reach command. She smirked faintly, though her chest ached. They still thought this was about her. They hadn't realized it was never about her survival. It was about clearing a path for her team. Ducked under a lip of stone, heart pounding, lungs pulling air in shallow bursts. Her cheek pressed against the mountain, skin chilled by its surface. She closed her eyes for a moment, just one, and let the chaos wash around her. Then slowly she whispered, "Grandpa, you'd understand." When she opened her eyes, they were steel again. 12 seconds. That's how long it took to cross the exposed ground between her and the command bunker. 12 seconds of fire snapping inches from her head, rounds biting at her heels, stone chipping like glass. She moved like a shadow, rifle up, burst suppressing, body low, breath steady. And then she was there. Pressed against reinforced concrete, close enough to feel the vibration of footsteps inside. The bunker door was steel, impenetrable without explosives. She had none, but she didn't need to force her way in. She knew patience. She knew human arrogance. It was only a matter of time before someone stepped out. Minutes dragged, sweat cooled against her neck. Her rifle stayed leveled, finger steady. Then footsteps, Metal creaked, the door cracked open. Colonel Ivan stepped outside, scanning the chaos with narrowed eyes. He never saw her. 3 rounds, center mass. His body slumped before he could even raise his weapon. The comms exploded in panic. Down, repeat, Commander, down. Inside, Colonel Petro's voice screamed for control. Orders barked, frantic, futile. He emerged seconds later, radio in hand, fury twisting his face. Fired twice. 1 round shattered his radio, the other pierced his chest. Silence fell over the ridge. Not complete silence, gunfire still echoed, men still shouted, but the silence of leadership severed, the silence of an army without its head. Didn't move. She stayed crouched, pressed against the concrete, heart slamming in her chest. She exhaled slowly, smoke curling from her muzzle. Above, the stars and stripes were still folded tight in her assault pack. She hadn't earned it yet. But she was getting close. What happens when the body keeps moving, but the mind whispers it should already be dead? Crouched in the shadow of the bunker, heart hammering so violently she feared the sound alone might betray her. She could still smell the cordite from the 3-round burst that had ended Colonel. His blood was pooling near her boots, dark against the mountain dust. Beside him lay Petro, radio shattered, chest torn open. 2 men, 2 architects of this ambush, gone in seconds. Her ears rang with the echo, though silence followed. Not complete silence. The mountain was still alive with distant bursts, stray shouts, confusion bleeding through enemy comms. But the sharp, surgical precision of leadership was gone. Orders collapsed into static. Cohesion unraveled into noise. For the first time since the trap had been sprung, allowed herself one shallow breath of relief. Not victory, not even hope, just a pause in the storm. Her shoulder throbbed, she hadn't realized until now how badly it burned from shrapnel. Blood seeped under her plate carrier, hot, sticky. She pressed a hand against it, winced, then forced her focus forward. She couldn't stop, not here. Not yet. She keyed her radio, voice level despite the ache in her chest. Viper, extraction route is clearing, both commanders down. Static, then Kennedy's voice strained, disbelief heavy. Say again, Fury, confirm. Confirmed, Petro and are down, I'm advancing. There was a pause long enough for her to hear the wind shift. Then Kennedy, Jesus Christ, Fury, hold your position, we'll regroup. Exhaled, staring at the steel door she had just used as cover. Hold, regroup. That wasn't enough. This complex wasn't neutralized. Fighters still occupied nests across the ridge, weapons still raked the valley, death still threatened anyone who dared return. If she stopped now, their deaths would only be delayed. Her finger hovered near the transmit button, but she let it fall. She didn't answer. She cut comms again. Because this wasn't about obedience anymore. It was about finishing what she had started. She moved. Low along the slope, boots slipping on loose gravel, lungs pulling thin, burning air. Her rifle rose, cracked, fell again into the rhythm she knew better than sleep. Controlled bursts, each one a punctuation mark in the language of war. She wasn't reckless, she was deliberate, precise, patient. But her patience wasn't endless. Time was bleeding out with her, drop by drop into the dust. Enemy comms cracked like thunder overhead. Commander is gone, regroup in the high bunker. So that was where they'd chosen to die. The highest ground, 15 of them, maybe more. Pulled herself behind cover, chest heaving. Her hands trembled as she checked her ammo. 55 rounds. That was it. 55 against 15 men who would be dug in, cornered, ready to sell their lives dearly. Her gut twisted, not enough. For the first time, a shadow crossed her certainty. What if Kennedy was right? What if she should hold, regroup, wait? But then she remembered the RPGs, the ambush, the broken comms unit lying in blood. Waiting meant they'd reset, rebuild, adapt. Another team would walk into this valley and bleed like hers had. Not if she could stop it. Her voice was quiet only for herself. "55's enough." She remembered her grandfather's flag, the weight of it folded, tucked into her assault pack, the way her father had never spoken about him, but had kept that flag framed in glass, staring at it some nights as if the stars and stripes might answer unspoken questions. She hadn't carried it for ceremony, she carried it for this. Tightened her grip on the rifle. Enough. She moved again. Up the slope, crawling through dead ground where barrels couldn't reach, climbing hand over hand through jagged stone. Each movement scraped her raw, each breath came ragged, each heartbeat was another drum counting down the seconds she had left. The bunker appeared above her, black muzzle flashes stabbing through its slits. She crept beneath their arc, the blind spot every fortification hides. She rose, rifle already raised. 15 bursts, 18 seconds. The math didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to muscle memory, instinct, training so deep it replaced thought. Each squeeze sent steel into flesh. Each pivot tracked another target before the last hit the ground. Men shouted, panicked, fired wildly, but none landed. Her figure blurred, angles shifted, rifle barked. Then silence. Only the wind remained. Lowered her weapon slowly, barrel still hot, chest heaving. The bunker was quiet now. 15 men lay inside, rifles still clutched, eyes still wide. The stronghold that had anchored this entire valley was nothing but stone and blood. Her rifle's counter read 15 rounds left. 15. She slid against the wall, pressing her helmet to stone, letting herself breathe for the first time in what felt like hours. Her chest ached, her shoulders screamed, her hands shook. But she was alive. And so were her brothers. Her pack felt heavier suddenly, though its weight hadn't changed. She pulled it off, unzipped it slowly, and the flag. Folded, worn, edges frayed from years of storage. The same flag that had covered her grandfather's casket. The same flag she had carried on every deployment since, though no one but she knew. She climbed higher, step by step, boots sinking into loose soil. At the ridge's peak, a pole jutted from the stone, the enemy's banner snapping defiantly in the thin wind. Paused, staring at it, her hands tightened on the folded cloth. Then she pulled the enemy's colors down, let them fall into the dust. She unfolded the flag carefully, reverently, despite the blood smeared across her gloves. Her hands shook as she tied it to the pole. She tugged once, firm. And then the stars and stripes rose above the mountain. The wind caught it, snapped it open, spread it wide. Sunlight broke through a cloud at that exact moment, striking the fabric so fiercely it seemed to glow. Below, silence rippled across the valley. SEAL Team Alpha, already halfway to extraction, turned and saw it. For a moment, even in retreat, they stopped. Ghost lifted his helmet. Phoenix whispered something none could hear. And Kennedy, hardened, calculating, unshakable Kennedy, closed his eyes. Just for a second. Keyed her radio at last, voice steady. "Viper, this is Fury. Extraction route clear. All hostiles eliminated. 27 KIA confirmed. The high ground belongs to us." 45 seconds of silence followed. Then Kennedy's voice, "Fury, report your status." She looked around at the bunker, the bodies, the blood, the flag snapping proudly above. Her shoulder burned, her chest throbbed, her head rang. "Operational," she said simply, "ready for extraction." The silence on the other end wasn't disbelief. It wasn't even relief. It was something harder to name, something heavier. "Fury," Kennedy finally said, voice low, "how the hell did you just do that?" She glanced back at the mountain, at the terrain designed to trap and kill men like him. Her lips curved faintly, though her eyes remained cold. "I didn't clear their complex," she replied. "I just decided it was ours." Why did the mountain feel so quiet now? The echoes of gunfire still lingered in its ears, but the valley had fallen into a strange, almost sacred stillness. Her hands were steady as she field-stripped her rifle, working through motions drilled into her bones, eject the magazine, clear the chamber, check the barrel. The weapon was hot, scratched, spattered with blood, but still serviceable. She sat at the base of the flagpole, helmet tilted back, breathing slow. Above her, the stars and stripes snapped in the thin wind, stubborn and bright against a sky still stained with smoke. Minutes later, rotor blades thumped in the distance, a deep, rhythmic sound that grew louder closer, until the rescue bird crested the ridge. Dust swirled, scattering empty casings, whipping the flag into a frenzy. Didn't rise to meet it. She stayed seated, cross-legged in the dirt, rifle parts laid neatly on the ground before her. The helicopter touched down hard. Its crew's eyes widened at the sight, not at the bodies scattered across bunkers that should have been impregnable, but at the solitary figure waiting beneath an American flag she herself had raised. One by one, SEAL Team Alpha climbed aboard. They moved like ghosts, weary, scraped, hollow-eyed from hours of survival. Each man glanced toward as they passed. Some nodded, some stared, some looked away. None spoke. Kennedy was last. He paused at the ramp, eyes locking on her. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he stepped forward. She looked up at him calmly, extractions clear. Kennedy's jaw tightened. He lowered himself onto the dirt beside her, ignoring the dust whipping around them. He studied the rifle parts spread on the ground. "You're field stripping under a flag you just planted on enemy ground," he said. His voice wasn't disbelief anymore. It was something quieter, something heavier. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Slid the bolt carrier back into place, clicked the upper receiver closed, locked the pin. Her hands didn't pause. "I cleared the route," she said simply. "No," Kennedy replied, shaking his head. "You rewrote every rule. You turned a complete tactical disaster into this." He gestured at the ridge, at the bodies, at the flag whipping furiously overhead. His eyes followed his hand for a second, then returned to her weapon. She snapped the magazine in, chambered a round, checked the safety. Her face gave nothing away. "I did what had to be done." Kennedy studied her profile, the sharp cheekbones smudged with dust, the streak of blood drying on her temple, the ice-blue eyes that never seemed to waver. For the first time, he felt something that unsettled him more than the ambush itself. Respect. Not the kind given automatically to skill or rank. A deeper respect, the kind earned only when someone reveals what they're willing to endure alone. He stood slowly. "Get on the bird, Fury. You've earned the ride home." She rose, slung her rifle, and followed him aboard. Inside the helicopter, the team was silent. The thump of blades drowned any attempt at words, but there weren't many to begin with. Sat against the wall, helmet off now, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat and grime. Her eyes fixed on the flag outside, still visible as the bird lifted into the sky. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink as long as the flag remained in sight. When it finally shrank into the distance, her gaze dropped to the floor. Her hands rested on the rifle across her lap, fingers absently tracing the worn grip. Only then did the tremor return. Small, subtle, but real. Her hands shook, the adrenaline bleeding out at last, leaving only exhaustion. She clenched her fists, forcing the tremor down. No one noticed, or if they did, no one mentioned it. Kennedy sat across from her, helmet in his lap. His eyes stayed fixed on her the entire ride, as though studying something he couldn't quite name. Finally, he leaned forward, voice raised just enough to cut through the rotor wash. "Fury, back there when I gave the retreat order, you had every right to follow it. No one would have questioned it." His eyes lifted slowly, "But I would have questioned it." Kennedy paused. He hadn't expected that answer, though maybe he should have. She continued, voice even, steady. "If we'd retreated, that valley would still belong to them. Another unit would walk into that kill zone someday. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but it would happen, and more brothers would die." Her eyes burned into his, unflinching. "I couldn't leave it behind, not like that." Kennedy swallowed hard, words caught in his throat. He wanted to argue about protocol, about survival, about orders, but the words withered before they left his mouth, because he knew she was right. Instead, he sat back silent. The helicopter thumped on through the sky, carrying them away from the valley that had nearly swallowed them whole. Back at base, the after-action report was written. Kennedy filed it himself, though every word felt like he was carving stone. One operator successfully assaulted and captured a fortified enemy complex defended by numerically superior forces. 27 hostiles eliminated, including 2 high-ranking commanders. Extraction route secured. Mission salvaged. The report circulated quickly. Commanders read it twice, 3 times. Some questioned its accuracy. Others demanded details. Analysts dissected every sentence, searching for loopholes, explanations, rationalizations. But the facts remained. One operator had done the impossible. When was summoned to the Pentagon weeks later, she sat across from generals in polished uniforms, their stars gleaming like medals of a different war. They asked her to explain, to walk them through her decisions, to justify breaking retreat orders. Her answers were always the same, simple, measured, quiet. My team needed a way out. I cleared the route, that's all. The generals exchanged looks, some skeptical, some impressed, some unsettled. They offered her an instructor position, safer, prestigious, a chance to shape doctrine instead of defying it. She declined. "I'm not done with the field," she said. Kennedy met her afterward, leaning against a wall outside the briefing room. He studied her with the same unreadable eyes he had in the helicopter. "You know," he said finally, "they're going to write your name into every manual after this. Your tactics, your assault, your everything." Adjusted the strap on her pack, her movements casual, almost dismissive. "Then maybe the manuals will catch up." She walked past him, boots echoing down the corridor, leaving Kennedy with a truth he didn't say aloud. That sometimes the difference between survival and extinction isn't doctrine, or orders, or even numbers. Sometimes it's just one person who refuses to retreat. Why does a soldier carry a flag into battle? Had asked herself that question often, though never aloud. She had slipped her grandfather's folded flag into her assault pack before every deployment, tucked it beneath extra magazines and medical gear, its fabric worn soft by years of hands that never let go. No one knew, not Kennedy, not Phoenix, not Ghost. It was her secret weight, her private promise. She'd been 10 years old the first time she saw it. A triangular fold of stars and stripes, pressed behind glass, sitting on a mantel her father never dusted. She remembered the day her curiosity broke the silence. "Dad, whose flag is that?" Her father had been sitting in his chair, boots unlaced, staring at the television without seeing it. His eyes had shifted to her slowly, as though the question had clawed him out of a place he didn't want to leave. "It's your grandfather," he said finally. His voice was flat, almost reluctant. She had waited, a child's patience endless when curiosity burned. Her father sighed. He didn't come home from Vietnam. That was all he said. He stood, left the room, never answered again. But had felt it, the weight of the silence that followed, the way her father never spoke of his own service, the way his eyes hardened when recruiters mailed pamphlets, the way he never saluted on Memorial Day. The flag was all that remained, a reminder, a warning, a ghost. Years later, when stood in the living room in uniform for the first time, her father had said nothing. No pride, no anger, just silence. But his eyes flicked for half a second to the flag behind glass. And she understood. That silence had been her inheritance. In boot camp, instructors shouted until their voices broke, breaking recruits down to build them up. Never shouted back. She absorbed, endured, let silence harden her. When others boasted about what they'd do in combat, she stayed quiet. When men muttered that women didn't belong, she let their words pass like smoke. Silence didn't weaken her, it sharpened her. The first time she fired a rifle on the range, her instructor leaned over, checking her stance. Relax your shoulders, don't fight the recoil. But wasn't fighting recoil. She was fighting memory, the weight of a folded flag, the silence of a father who never spoke. Her first 3 rounds punched through the bullseye, dead center. Her instructor stepped back, muttering something under his breath. She didn't hear him. Her ears were filled with silence. Over the years, silence became her edge. She didn't argue in briefings. She didn't brag in barracks. She didn't curse under fire. She listened. She studied. She calculated. It unsettled some of her teammates. They called her Fury, not because she shouted, but because when she finally moved, her fury was absolute. In the valley, when Kennedy had screamed for retreat, her silence had spoken louder. One choice, one step forward, one refusal to bend. Now, weeks later, back at Little Creek, she sat in a medical bay with her shoulders stitched and bandaged, staring at the ceiling while doctors talked around her. You were lucky, shrapnel missed the artery. Another inch and you'd be in a coffin. She nodded but said nothing. Kennedy visited the next day. He stood by her bed, arms crossed, studying her. His jaw worked like he wanted to say 100 things but couldn't find one. Finally, he asked, "Why didn't you just follow the order?" Turned her head, ice blue eyes locking on him. Would you have followed it if you knew the next team would die in that valley? Kennedy exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging. No, but I would expected someone else to. Looked back at the ceiling. Then you expected wrong. Their silence stretched. It wasn't hostile. It was heavy. It was the silence of 2 people who had seen death up close and realized rules were thinner than paper in the face of it. After she was released, she walked the base alone at night. The docks stretched into dark water, moonlight cutting silver across the surface. She carried the folded flag in her hands, feeling the creases, the threads, the weight of a life it once covered. She whispered, voice barely audible above the water, "Grandpa, I didn't retreat. I won't." Her eyes burned, but no tears fell. She hadn't cried since she was 12, standing in her room with the flag pressed to her chest, swearing silently she'd never let silence own her again. Now that vow was all she had left. She declined the Pentagon's offer to become an instructor. She declined a safer post, declined medals framed in glass. She wanted only the field. Because silence still haunted her. Silence wasn't peace. Silence was retreat. And Wright had built her life on never retreating. What happens when the enemy begins to fear not your numbers, not your weapons, but your refusal to break? 7 months after the mountain, Fury Wright was back in theater. The desert stretched endless before her this time, a horizon of sand and stone where shadows bent with heat. SEAL Team Alpha moved in silence, dust trailing their boots, eyes scanning the jagged terrain. The mission was straightforward on paper: disrupt a weapons convoy, seize intelligence, extract clean. But paper never bled. The convoy was better armed than intel suggested. Technicals bristled with heavy machine guns. Fighters rode with precision rather than chaos, and the valley they rolled through was another carefully prepared choke point. When the first bursts ripped through the silence, Kennedy didn't even flinch. Contact front. The team scrambled into cover. Ghost returned fire, Phoenix flanked, Hammer launched grenades. It was the rhythm of survival, violent, chaotic, loud. But was already somewhere else. She lay prone against a dune, rifle braced, scope zeroed. Through her optics, she watched the convoy unravel into dust and shouts. The fighters weren't panicking. They were maneuvering, coordinated, clever. It felt familiar, too familiar. Her jaw clenched, another trap. But this time she didn't wait for orders. She moved. "Fury, where the hell are you going?" Kennedy barked as she broke from cover. She didn't answer. Not yet. Her boots dug into sand as she sprinted along the ridge, sliding into a shadowed cut in the rock. She climbed, every muscle straining, every breath tearing through her lungs. At the crest, she dropped prone, rifle snapping into position. Her first burst cut down a machine gun crew pinning Phoenix. Her second dropped a fighter moving to flank Hammer. Her third tore through the driver of a technical, the vehicle lurching to a halt in the sand. Enemy comms cracked with panic. She's here, the American storm. The name spread faster than bullets. Fighters ducked when they should fired. Their coordination faltered. And SEAL Team Alpha pushed forward. Kennedy's voice cut through comms, sharp and commanding. Advance, secure the intel. Within minutes, the convoy was wreckage and silence. Smoke drifted over twisted steel, heat shimmering above broken engines. The team regrouped, breathless, scanning the battlefield. Kennedy's eyes landed on. She stood at the ridge, rifle still smoking, eyes locked on the horizon as if expecting another wave. "You couldn't wait, could you?" he muttered. She finally turned, face streaked with dust, eyes hard as glass. "I didn't wait on the mountain either." He almost smiled, almost. They recovered crates of weapons, documents thick with maps and coordinates, radios crackling with codes. Intel officers later said the haul disrupted weeks of enemy operations, but none of that mattered in the moment. What mattered was the whisper that spread through fighters who survived. The American storm doesn't retreat, she advances. That night back at Forward Operating Base, the team sat in a dimly lit tent, steam rising from mugs of instant coffee. The mood was quieter than usual. Victories never felt like victories when blood stained the sand. Hammer broke the silence first. "Fury, what the hell drives you? You ever think maybe you've got a death wish?" Sipped her coffee, eyes on the floor. She didn't answer. Phoenix cut in, voice softer. "It's not death she's chasing, it's something else." Ghost leaned back, arms crossed. "Yeah, what then?" Phoenix shook her head. "Ask her yourself." All eyes turned too. She set her mug down slowly, fingers lingering on the chipped rim. "When we retreat," she said quietly, "we leave ground behind, and someone else will die trying to take it back. I don't retreat because I won't hand that ground to the enemy, not while I can stand." The tent fell silent again, not the uneasy silence of doubt, a heavier silence, respect. Kennedy broke it at last. "Doctrine says sometimes you have to fall back, reposition, survive to fight another day." His eyes met his. "Doctrine doesn't bury our brothers." No one argued after that. Weeks turned to months. More missions. More ambushes turned inside out. More traps sprung, only to be broken by the one operator who refused to play by rules written for survival instead of victory. Her tactics unsettled commanders. Reports came back with words like reckless, unconventional, unsustainable. But the results spoke louder. Missions saved, routes cleared, objectives achieved. One night, Kennedy received a direct order from command. "Keep right in line. We can't have operators rewriting doctrine mid-battle." He closed the comm quietly, didn't mention it to her, didn't need to, because when the next ambush came, she was already moving. Enemy fighters learned to dread her presence. Some refused to advance if intel suggested she was in the area. They whispered of the storm that turned retreat into slaughter, of the woman who planted flags where death was supposed to reign. Never acknowledged the whispers. She didn't seek fear, she didn't seek respect. She sought only silence. The kind that came when a battlefield went still, when her team walked away alive, when the folded flag in her pack remained just cloth, not coffin cover. But at night, when the others slept, she sometimes sat alone, rifle across her lap, staring at the sand under starlight. And in those moments, doubt whispered, "How many times can you do this before the mountain finally takes you? How many retreats can you turn into victories before silence claims you too?" She never answered, she just sat with the whisper. Because silence was her inheritance. And she would carry it until it carried her. What happens when one soldier's refusal to break spreads like fire to everyone around her. It was midnight when the order came down. A joint operation, U.S. and Allied Special Forces, to seize a remote compound believed to be housing senior enemy coordinators. Dozens of fighters, fortified positions, a kill zone waiting to happen. The plan was cautious. Advance, test defenses, probe the perimeter, fall back if resistance proved too heavy. Doctrine dictated patience. But patience dies quickly under fire. The approach began smooth. Teams ghosted through the desert under a moonless sky, NVGs glowing green. Kennedy led the way, his voice crisp over comms, every movement precise. Drifted at the flank, rifle steady, her mind mapping terrain before they ever reached it. Then the valley erupted. Machine guns hammered from concealed ridges. Mortars thudded into sand. Fighters swarmed like shadows given teeth. Contact, contact, someone shouted, voice clipped by static. Chaos tore through the joint force. Allied operators dove for cover, confusion ripping at their formation. Return fire scattered but uncoordinated. The enemy had known they were coming. Another trap. Kennedy's voice barked into comms. All units, tactical withdrawal, pull back to rally. The words were familiar, the safe play, the expected play. But froze. Through her scope she saw the trap tightening, fighters already cutting off the retreat path, machine guns bracketing the escape route. Retreat would mean slaughter. Her chest tightened. The memory of the mountain flashed, Kennedy's voice screaming, her boots stepping forward instead of back. Not again. Her voice cut through comms, calm and certain. Negative, Viper, they'll kill us if we run, we advance. The channel fell silent. Dozens of operators heard it. Men trained their entire careers to obey orders, suddenly caught between instinct, doctrine, and one voice that sounded more like truth than command. Fury, that's a direct, Kennedy started. But then across the battlefield, they saw her rise. She stood in open ground, rifle barking in controlled bursts. Fighters fell one after another, her silhouette a defiant figure lit by muzzle flash. She moved forward, not away, cutting through fire like the laws of war bent around her. Something shifted. Phoenix broke cover next, sprinting after her, firing bursts to her flank. Ghost cursed into comms but followed. Then Hammer. Then two Allied operators who had never fought beside her before. One by one, men who moments ago crouched in fear of annihilation began to rise. The retreat order dissolved. The advance began. Enemy fighters panicked. The trap that should crushed became a killing ground for them. Every step took forward drew others with her. Her refusal to fall back became their rally. Her defiance became their permission. Within minutes the line flipped. The enemy faltered, fell back, stumbled into their own confusion. Kennedy's voice returned, not with command but with something else. All units advance, follow Fury's lead. And they did. The valley turned, the compound fell, the joint force seized it in under an hour. Later, intelligence officers would say the operation disrupted a major offensive, dismantled networks, and saved untold lives. But none of that mattered in the moment. What mattered was the silence afterward. The stillness of the compound, bodies cooling in the sand, weapons abandoned, flags lowered. Stood at the heart of it, rifle still smoking, chest rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. Around her, operators from 3 nations stared, some in awe, some in disbelief, some in quiet gratitude. One younger soldier, barely 20, approached her. His voice shook. "Ma'am, when you stood up back there, why?" She studied him, her face unreadable. "Because retreat wasn't survival," she said quietly. "It was death delayed, and I don't delay death when I can take life back instead." The young man nodded slowly, words caught in his throat. Kennedy joined her then, helmet under his arm, face streaked with sweat and dust. He looked at her for a long time before speaking. You just made doctrine irrelevant. Adjusted her rifle strap, eyes fixed on the horizon. Doctrine isn't supposed to save us. It's supposed to guide us. Sometimes we have to walk past it. Kennedy almost smiled, though his eyes carried weight. You realize command's going to lose their minds when they hear about this. Let them, said. We didn't lose ours. The team moved out at dawn. Extraction secured, compound under control. But word spread faster than the sunrise. Operators whispered about it over radios, around fire pits, in quiet bunks. The story grew. How retreat was called, how a single soldier stood instead, how others followed, how death was turned back by defiance. Some called it reckless, some called it madness, but others called it leadership. And enemies who intercepted those whispers gave it another name altogether. The storm has returned. What remains when the battlefield falls silent? For most soldiers, it's the ringing in the ears, the smell of smoke, the weight of what's been lost. For Fury Wright, silence had always meant something else. Not peace, not absence, a presence, a reminder. Months turned into years, missions blurred, names of valleys and compounds bled together like scars etched on stone. But everywhere went, her shadow stretched further than her boots. At Little Creek, instructors began telling new recruits about her mountain assault, not in lectures, but in hushed tones, as if saying it too loud might make it sound like a myth. In classrooms, her name appeared on slides, her tactics dissected with laser pointers, diagrams drawn over maps. Single operator complex assault, words that hadn't existed before she carved them into doctrine with blood and fire. But stories travel faster than manuals. In dusty fob tents across the world, young operators whispered of her. Some called her reckless, others called her inevitable. Many never met her, but when retreat orders came down in their own firefights, more than a few remembered her story and chose to stand. Command struggled. Reports praised her results but condemned her defiance. Analysts filed papers debating whether she was rewriting doctrine or destroying it. Some generals demanded her pulled from the field. Others demanded every soldier learn to fight like her. Ignored them all. She didn't fight for doctrine. She didn't fight for manuals. She didn't even fight for recognition. She fought because she carried silence. The silence of a folded flag in a glass case. The silence of a father who never spoke of war. The silence of brothers who couldn't speak after falling in ambushes designed to trap them. And she fought because silence deserved an answer. On one mission years later, Petty Officer Sarah "Venom" Parker, a younger SEAL who had trained under, stood in a briefing room, listening as a commander explained the risk of their target site. Too fortified, the man said. If things go south, retreat is the only option. Sarah raised her hand. With respect, sir, retreat isn't the only option. The room shifted, eyes turned, the commander frowned. And what would you suggest, Parker? She swallowed hard, voice steady. Sometimes the most effective way to retreat is to advance. The words spread, carried by whispers, then by conviction. Never claimed them. She never corrected them. She never reminded anyone that those words had first been written not in ink, but in blood on a mountain ridge. Because legacy wasn't hers to claim. Legacy belonged to those who carried it forward. Years later, historians would argue about the impact of her decisions. Some said she changed nothing, that wars raged on, battles were fought the same, and blood still soaked into foreign soil. Others said she changed everything, that by proving one operator could turn defeat into victory, she reshaped how armies thought about courage, initiative, and survival. But those who served beside her didn't need historians. They remembered the silence in their helmets the moment she cut comms and stood against death itself. They remembered the sound of her voice afterward, calm and steady, extraction route clear. And they remembered the flag. Long after storms stripped it from the mountain peak, soldiers spoke of it. A flag raised where no flag should have flown. A flag that told enemies the ground wasn't theirs, and told allies the impossible was only impossible until someone refused to retreat. Herself never spoke of it. She carried the memory quietly like the flag in her pack, folded, worn, hidden. When asked in interviews or debriefs why she didn't fall back, her answers were always the same. The team needed a way out. I gave it to them. No more, no less. And maybe that was the lesson. That victory isn't always the roar of triumph, but the whisper of one voice refusing to break. That courage isn't measured in medals, but in the silence carried after retreat has been. In the end, Wright didn't leave behind a perfect doctrine or a flawless legacy. She left behind something rarer. Proof. Proof that even when the order is to fall back, a single act of defiance can change everything. Proof that sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And proof that silence, when carried with conviction, can echo louder than any war cry.